Hi, I'm Frank Scalise, the author of A Street Officer's Guide to Report Writing. And I'm here to talk to you today for just a couple of minutes about effective police reports. In order to be effective, your police report needs to be four things. It needs to be clear, it needs to be concise, it needs to be complete, and it needs to be accurate. I call these the four pillars of report writing. Let's talk about each of them. Number one, clear. Clear can mean a lot of different things. First off, it means clear as in I can read it. Make sure your handwriting is good. Make sure if you type it, which most people will these days, that you use a point size that's large enough to read and a font size that's a standard font size. Single space your reports. People are used to reading that in books and magazines, newspapers. But go ahead and double space between those paragraphs. It does break up the page a little bit and it allows you to find your place later when you're doing follow-up or somebody else is doing follow-up, say a detective or some other kind of investigator. But being clear means more than that. Being clear means being understood. When somebody reads your report, they need to understand what it is you're saying, what it is that occurred. And so one of the things that you want to make sure that you do is always write in chronological order. That means in time order. That means start with when you started to investigate this incident and finish when you're completely done. When you left the scene, logged off, went home, rode into the sunset, whatever it is. Do it in that order. This isn't a Quentin Tarantino film. We're not going to jump around in the timeline. You start with when you got it and you end when you left. And everybody else's events that you might recount that they told you about, you tell in the time order within the chronology of your own time order. The other thing about being clear is make sure you're clear about who's talking, who's who to who, and when somebody says something and you're quoting them, make sure that it's clear that that's who you're quoting. If somebody tells you something versus you seeing it yourself, make sure you're clear that that person is reporting it to you, not that you saw it yourself. Be clear on the actions that you took, and use straightforward language because that is the simplest, most stripped down language that people will, and they'll understand it. Again, always remember that the person who's reading your report, in all likelihood, was not at the scene of whatever incident it is that you're reporting on. They don't know anything except what they're going to read in your report. And if it isn't clear, if they're confused, it's going to cause problems. Concise is the second pillar. And being concise simply means to be brief, include only relevant information. We don't need to know the barometric pressure or what the score of the football game was on TV in the background. Those things don't matter. What matters is the relevant elements of this investigation. Being complete, on the other hand, is kind of the flip side of concise, and that means including every relevant piece of information. I don't think the barometric pressure is probably relevant, but if it is, you need to include it in the report. If the score of the football game is what started the argument between the husband and wife, then maybe that is relevant and does need to be included. But being complete means remembering that the person that's reading it, they weren't there, that person wasn't there, and you need to include everything that they need to know to understand what it is that occurred. If you don't include that information, they have no way of knowing that it occurred, and there's going to be a gap in their knowledge that could be a very important gap, and you don't want to have that. Lastly, your report needs to be accurate. And of all four of the pillars, accuracy is probably the one that people expect from law enforcement the most. It's also probably the biggest violation not to adhere to being accurate. If you break it down, you look at it, if you're not entirely clear, people will be confused. If you're not very concise, you'll have a cluttered report and things might get lost in the report, but at least the information is in there. If you are not complete and something's missing, people aren't going to know they're missing it necessarily. But if you put a piece of information in your report and it isn't accurate, then because it's there, people will look at it, they will read it, they will accept it, they will feel that it's accurate, and they will act upon it. And that'll be your responsibility for putting inaccurate information in your report. How do you be accurate? Double check your facts. That's biographical information. That's factual information. That's witness statements. Take your time. Take good notes because memory does fade. Make people be specific because that's a piece of accuracy. Don't just accept somebody saying he got mad or they got in a fight. Get the specific actions that occurred. How did you know they were mad? His face got red. He started yelling. Spittle flew out of his mouth. Does they got in a fight mean they had a verbal argument that was slightly elevated voices, or were they yelling and screaming at each other, or were they throwing haymakers and punching each other? That's far more specific and far more accurate. So the information needs to be right and it needs to be specific in order to be accurate. Accuracy is critical. So quick review, the 4 pillars of report writing. Your report needs to be clear, needs to be concise, it needs to be complete, and it needs to be accurate. If you pay attention to all 4 of these pillars and make sure that you adhere to them and that they're all these elements are present in your report, then the result you'll have will be an effective report, an effective police report, which is what you're striving for. Thanks.